Welcome to the Money and Meaning Show with Jeff Bernier, a show dedicated to helping you gain the confidence and freedom to lead a life of personal significance and help you get your actions and resources in alignment with what matters most.
Well, hello and welcome to the Money and Meaning Show. My name is Jeff Bernier. I am so delighted you decided to spend a few minutes with us today. I am really excited about our guest. Today's guest works with people who look successful on paper, but want their lives to feel as good on the inside as they do on the outside. Tommy Newberry is an executive coach, best-selling author, and founder of Newberry Consulting. For decades, he's worked with business owners, executives, professionals, helping them think more clearly about success, character, goals, and the daily habits that shape a well-lived life. He's the author of a bunch of books. The three that have been really impactful for me were Success is Not an Accident, The 4-8 Principle, and 40 Days to a Joy-Filled Life. So let me get Tommy on here. Tommy, welcome to the show. Really happy to have you, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for inviting me, and glad to spend some time with you.
Thanks so much. I always love to start these shows, and I know a little bit about you because I was involved in some of your programs over the years, and certainly followed your career and some of your work. But I love for the audience just to get to know you personally a little bit. So, do you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure. So, I've been coaching for so long that I've forgotten what I did before then. But so that goes back to October of 1991 is when I started coaching. And so it's been a long time. I've been married for 32 years. I've got 3 grown boys, one that just turned 20, another that's about to turn 28, and then one that's 30. I'm pretty soon I'm going to be a grandfather for the first time. So I love working out, climbing mountains. I've just started running at age 58. I just started getting into running. So I ran my first trail run in December, since 2 of my sons are doing that. But I love to write and coach and speak. And I particularly get fired up working with people who want to, crush it economically, but at the same time, not neglect their faith, their family, and their health. And it's not always easy to do. It's easy to give it lip service, but that's kind of been my little niche since the early days, because nobody was filling it, which is, how do you get to the next level economically without screwing up your faith, your family, and your health? And so we've attracted a great audience of people that, we've got clients that have worked with us since the late 90s that are, I see them every quarter, for 30 years, basically. So that's a little bit. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's a pretty good snapshot right there.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I was gonna use a quote that I steal all the time that I know you probably know from Howard Thurman that says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes your heart come alive, and go do that.
Yeah,
because what the world needs are people whose hearts have come alive. And so my setup question was going to be, what makes your heart come alive? And I think I just heard some of it. It's all about, your family. Family's big, and yeah.
Yeah, I associate that question, I think, or a similar question with John Eldridge. And he said, what makes you come alive? Like, he didn't even necessarily dig down into the heart aspect of it, but I think we're talking about the same thing. What makes you come alive?
That's the first time I heard it was from John Eldridge.
Strangely, I've been working on our 28th annual couples planning retreat, and I have that question as one that I'm posing to couples. And you may think, well, that question really doesn't relate to marriage, but it really does, because we attack marriage from a strong individual, strong marriage, strong family, strong legacy. But you got to start with the individual. So I think a lot of times people get off kilter because they're not strong as individuals. And I don't mean that literally, of course. I mean, do they have their act together? Do they have
clear lack of clarity?
Are they clear about what they want? Do they have their ego under control? Are they grounded spiritually? Those kinds of things. But what makes me come alive, I think I can, in addition to coaching, so I love coaching, I get energized. So if I've spent a day coaching, whether it's a workshop or one-on-one, which when I do both, I'm energized. Now, I may have a little bit of fatigue, like you've run a race and you feel really satisfied, but you're tired that way. But mainly I'm energized, and I like to write. I like to use words to, influence people to think bigger. And I like to speak. And each time I coach, I think I'm a better writer. And each time I write, I think I'm a better speaker, and so forth. So if there was one other thing outside of what I do for a living, it'd probably be being outdoors, specifically hiking. I just love to hike. I hike by myself, I hike with friends, I hike with clients, hike with my boys. But to me, it's not just exercise, it's kind of like a spiritual experience being out in nature. And sometimes you need to do it by yourself. Sometimes it's great to have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, you hit on something too about when you have a day when you're in that zone. At the end of the day, while you may be physically tired, I find that I have more energy than I did when I started.
I think that's a sign that you're doing what you were made to do. It's also exciting looking forward to those kinds of days. So sometimes if I'm struggling, or I'm feeling worn down or something, I'll look at my calendar and as a way of anticipating, like maybe going on a trip. But what do I have to look forward to as far as a day where I can be fully absorbed? And just the anticipation of it is energizing, I think. Just looking forward to it, even if it's 10 days away.
So you started coaching in 91. So prior to that, was some of that missing for you in your previous career? I mean, what did you do prior to coaching?
I got out of college in 89. And so I worked for 2 years approximately in sales, in software sales, and then in software consulting, where I taught workshops. And I taught to the end user, customer order processing, demand forecasting, what is all under the umbrella of what today is called supply chain management. But what I found out was I loved teaching.
What teaching? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was also coaching Little League Baseball simultaneously, because I previously had been infatuated with baseball for 2 decades. And so I kind of, clicked with me. So I was pretty young, and I thought, I like a lot of what I'm doing, but I don't really love it. And I'm single, living in an apartment, making decent money for a, 24, 25-year-old, but I don't really love what I do. And I just established loving what I do as a value. And because all of my clients, all of my network of, like, I have older siblings and some brother-in-laws, and just my observations at the time were a lot of people did not like doing what they were doing for a living. I think Gallup did their first poll around that time that showed 80% of Americans would rather be doing something else for a living. And I thought, well, if I wait and get married and get a house and start going down that path and then decide, that's going to make it a lot more complicated. So I'm going to try to find out what I love to do that'll feel less like work, although it's still feeling like a lot of work. But I was either going to coach baseball or I was going to coach entrepreneurs. That was after a lot of thought. I broke it down to one of those two things. I thought the baseball, I didn't get quite far enough playing that I would have had an easy path or a straight path to the level that I wanted to coach. And so I thought, there's too many things that are outside of my control. And that's kind of what shifted me toward entrepreneurs. Originally, commercial real estate and financial services were the two areas, because I was dealing with producers and brokers, and for them to increase their income, they had to get more productive. They had to get better at life. And then over time, I just kind of attracted more and more that were, very aware of the traps you can fall into as you build your career, you start making a lot of money. And then that's when I kind of transition to helping people balance. I don't even like the word balance, but live with your priorities in order. Balance is not a bad word. It's just that balance is kind of implies maybe equity or a similarity across all things. And the truth is, we would all be like in prayer and worship all day long, possibly, if we say, hey, our faith is number one, or our family's number one, And really, when I'm working, I'm not just working, I'm also a provider, during my role. So I'm really accomplishing that. But if I'm doing it right, then my work is also my ministry. And so it's not as easy as, 5 areas of life. Can you balance them exactly evenly? Because that's kind of silly when you actually think about it. But living on priority is makes sense.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was Success Not an Accident the first major book that
It
you put
was.
out
It was.
in
Yeah.
terms of the habits? And that was sort of the foundation of your coaching, I guess, in those early days.
Correct.
So what are some of the key tenets or the key activities or habits that the successful have that drive success? What are some of the key elements that are either in the book or that you've uncovered since the book?
I've learned a lot since I originally wrote that book during the Summer Olympics of 1996. I didn't publish it. I didn't get it published. It came out the Halloween of 97, and I self-published it. And then 7 years later, when I got the contract for the 4-8 principle, the publisher, Tyndale House, said they wanted to buy Success is Not an Accident and re-release it. Because I'd already sold a bunch on my own with the good grace and help of my clients all across the country. Amazon was emerging in the late 90s, believe it or not. And so we were able to get the message out that way. But the core message is still the same. I've just made a lot of distinctions. I've had one attempt to rewrite the book. There might be another coming. But it's number one, you've got to be clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And that's true, I think, if you're coming right out of college. And it's also true if you're thinking about, okay, what am I going to do with the second half of my life? Or what kind of marriage do I want to have? So most people take it for granted, it seems to me, that they have enough clarity about what they're trying to accomplish. And they are really fuzzy, but they have more clarity about what they don't want. So over the years, I've often, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but I've started with the inverse. Tell me what you don't want after you've been married for 15 or 20 years. Tell me what you don't want your health and body to be like and look like and feel like after 15 years. Tell me what you don't want to happen in this partnership that you're starting to regret already. Tell me that, and then people look at it and they kind of laugh. We often do that at the couples planning retreat. We say, hey, what is the worst possible marriage advice you could give your grown kids? Give me the 3 worst things that you would tell them to do. And people laugh because before they even start writing those things down, what do you think is going through their mind?
Yeah, do the opposite.
Yeah, but they're also like, without me even having to say it, inside their head, they're acknowledging that they might be doing some of those things.
Oh, yeah, right. I may be guilty of this.
Yeah. So, but by them having to think, what do I want for my son or daughter who's maybe getting close to getting married? It totally makes it impersonal, and they're able to write these things down, and then they look at them, and it like jumps out to
Wow, I'm
them.
doing that.
Oh yeah, I'm doing that, or a shade of that, or wow, we've drifted into this area. The second thing I'd probably say is, so clarity, number one. Number two would be willing to fail faster. Whatever it is, trying a new workout routine. If if somebody's single, not getting stuck in the wrong relationship, business wise, pivoting when you realize that the decision you made or the hire you made was the wrong one, instead of hanging on to it to kind of justify your original decision. As soon as you realize you made the wrong decision, change it, and don't let your ego get in the way of correcting a bad decision. I see this in organizations, schools, relationships of all kinds. They make bad hires, and then they don't want to reverse the hire because it makes them look bad. When it'd be better to just bite the bullet, go, okay, we goofed, because everybody goofs. That's the thing, is everybody goofs, and let's just change it and then get on the right track.
Yeah, the thing about the opposite of what you want to have happen, or the anti-goals, or whatever term you want to use for that. I mean, that was, Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger. I mean, that was his method. Always invert. Always That was the term he used. Look at the opposite.
It's something, I'm not sure exactly how to explain it, but so I did that with the 4A principle at one point. Like, and the first time I did it, like in front of a group, I had no idea whether it was going to work. I said, well, so here's the verse I'm talking about. And then
But that also, let me interrupt for a second, but that also takes some courage for you, I think, because, you've written extensively about programming our minds to what we want in the mental discipline. I mean, that's a lot of what this is about. It's all spiritually and biblical wisdom about focusing on where you're headed. And now you're saying, focus on where you don't want to head.
it's just like a good teaching, like there's some good drills in athletics, such as plyometrics or stadium steps or, certain types of sprinting or walking up a hill backwards to strengthen your knees. And so there's certain things teaching, and that inverse approach is pretty good. And in the 4-8 principle, the casual way to say what the message in my book, The 4-8 Principle, is all about is focus on the good stuff. And that statement acknowledges that there's not so good stuff and there's good stuff. And so we always have a choice, focus on what is, and then this is where the Bible verse comes in, what is lovely, pure, true, gracious, just. If there's any excellence, dwell on those things. But it's kind of funny when you go, instead of focus on the good stuff, nobody would ever say focus on the bad stuff unless they were temporarily trying to solve a problem, but you really probably wouldn't use that language. But when you make the verse say from Philippians 4:8, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is ugly, impure, vicious, nasty, rude, and unreliable, think on these things. Then it's the same kind of thing I was mentioning with the marriage before is people start to think, oh my gosh, in the last hour, I've dwelled on some news story that did me or anybody else no good, or I griped at my wife or my husband for this one thing when there's 20 other things that I completely ignored that were positive. And that's just human nature. So if you understand human nature, I might put that as the third thing, clarity, fail faster, and then understand human nature so that you can leverage it to your advantage, because it's working on us. It's working on us whether we realize it or want it to. So we might as well, it's kind of like knowing how we probably don't know a lot of the things that our phones can do, but the more we know about them, the more leverage we can get out of our phone. And so if we know a lot about how we're made, then we can leverage ourselves to do good things in the world.
That's pretty insightful. So as we start the new year, I know that success is not an accident. Some of your other resources, again, you had a sort of a year process. So as we start a new year, and the audience for this show are largely half-timers, in the Bob Buford lexicon. I'm sure you might know that material, but it's people in the locker room strategizing what's next, and they've had success on the front end, and now they're trying to figure out what's next. That's really who I write to and who I try to speak to in this show, and how we marry good wealth management to give them the means to do it. But what would you say to those types of individuals who are moving into Act 2 in terms of goal setting or processes and habits and rituals? I mean, those are the kinds of, because the problem I've had personally with goal setting is if I don't have some type of process or ritual, again, to your point about human nature, the shiny object will get my attention instead of what I really valued that I wrote down in the goal. So there's a lot in that question. So any thoughts on how we can start the new year in some rituals or practices or ideas on how we can be intentional but stay the course through the year?
Yeah, that's a great 12-point question there, Jeff.
But I'm such a good interviewer here, yeah.
So it probably could work, as a good strategy, regardless of what time it is. But at the natural turning point of a year, first of all, it's very important, to be clear on what you want to accomplish. So if you're I'm working with more and more clients So I have clients that are my age and older than my age. And then only in the last 5 years have I started to see a significant number of new clients that are, newly married, or they've got small kids and they're in their 30s, early 40s and things like that. But I've still got clients that are 5 to 10 years older than me. So they're approaching 70. And so obviously the focus of what they're looking for and what they're trying to accomplish is a little bit different. And they've all done really well. But as it relates to men, especially, just the way God made men is men, I think retirement is just a bad idea. Number one, I've witnessed it and I've studied it, and I can't find anything good about it. Now, being able to retire is a great thing. Being able to retire, in other words, not needing to work, is a great thing. But God designed us, particularly men, to solve problems and to build things. And so I believe we begin to die spiritually, emotionally, and physically the second we stop building things and solving problems. So if you are kind of tired of solving the problems you're currently solving, that's fine, or building what you're building, but go find something else to build and something else to solve and place great demands on yourself. We're learning from breakthroughs in science that, physically there's not nearly as many limitations, when you get into your 50s and 60s as previously was thought. It was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. People remembered their grandparents and parents kind of slowly getting feeble and dying. And so they start to slow down, when the opposite is the best strategy, is to increase, use some of your margin to work out more often, to explore your faith more often. But particularly, this is men and women, but particularly men, using margin that you have to examine your ego and how much of that part of you, kind of the which you're not going to take with you. You're not going to take your body with you. You're not going to take your ego with you. So if you can get your ego out of the way, then it's almost like as you approach the second half, or you get that second wind, then it's like a fresh start and a new beginning. As far as like the rituals, those are important. There's some people, and I think this is all kind of from a marketing standpoint, is they'll go out with the goals, in with the rituals, or out. You don't need goals anymore. You just need habits.
Yeah, I read a book years ago from Joshua Metcalf, I think, called "Burn Your Goals."
Yeah, there's burn your goals, and then James Clear in the habits. But when you read in depth, you find out, and it's kind of common sense, you've got to have goals, because if you don't have goals, how would you know what kind of rituals to set? How would you know what habit? I mean, if you go through just a normal cognitive process, nobody goes, what habits should I have? They out of, in a vacuum, they're thinking, well, I want to get lean. I want to be a better spouse. I want my marriage to be stronger. I don't want to have to be concerned with money. Ergo, what habits do I need to set, or what rhythms and rituals? Now, having said that, I think if somebody wants to, spend 20% of their time figuring out what is the mountain they're going to climb, and then they want to day in, day out, instead of focusing on the top of the mountain, like focusing on the national championship, let's say, they're just going to focus on running the drills and the next game and the next game and the next game, and running the drills and self-evaluation. I think that's good. There's a term that's used a lot today called rhythms, which is kind of a combination of your habits and processes, and doing them at a frequency that is not forced, and you kind of get into a good rhythm. But so all those things, I'd say, figure out what you want to be true. Like if I were working with you, Jeff, I'd say, imagine we're having this conversation. It's a year from today. What are 3, 4, 5 things that you'd like to be 100% true a year from today that are not 100% true today? They may be 50% true, 20%, or 0%, but they're not 100% true. And these are like conditions. These aren't so much goals. They're just, what do you want to be true? I have lots of energy. I'm rocking with my wife. I'm having, I work 3-day weeks, whatever it is. And you just lay out these conditions that you'd like to be true. And then we'll go, okay, let's back up from that. If we want those to be true, what processes and methods do we need to put into place to make that happen? And then you're being intentional versus living a life by default. And the worst time to live a life by default would probably be when you're starting off out of college. A lot of people waste their 20s. The second time would be when you're going into the second half and you're kind of thinking, I'm in the sunset kind of years and I'm coasting. I think it should be the exact opposite approach. I mean, that may not be for everybody, but the people that I like working with are thinking, hey, you know what? I'm just now wise enough to do the really big things. And look at this. I'm about to turn 60. I said, fantastic. I mean, just think about what you could accomplish between 60 and 80. But there are four forces that seem to throw people off track, throughout life, that if they don't address those four forces, then they end up living more and more reactively throughout their life. And if they're aware of them, then they can work with them and make them work to their advantage.
Yeah, you have time to hit those four quickly?
Yes. So let me know if I'm going too long, but these are the most, I understood these a little bit, but it wasn't probably until after COVID that I really understood them.
So these are four forces that can derail you pursuing your vision.
Yeah. And so they have cost more marriages than any kind of communication flaw or any kind of thing that you would think would be standard. It's caused more people to lose their business, lose their partnership, wreck their marriage, drop dead, at 55 unexpectedly. And they're forces, but they could also be looked at as patterns. But first I'll mention them as four forces that act upon you. And they all start with a D, and they are distraction, dispersion, drift, and delay. And so there's with distraction, which, is a word we use all the time, but there's the short-term distractions that are somewhat benign, like our phones or somebody walking in our office or, the water heater burst. We got these distractions. Those are kind of somewhat meaningless distractions, but they do add up. But the bigger distractions are when you don't have boundaries or ground rules for your life and you say yes to things that don't fit your mission. And why do you do that? Because you don't have a clear mission. So that's the shiny object, a variation of what you were talking about, is you're changing course too often. So if you have the starting point and the end point, distraction could be symbolized or graphed out with a squiggly line going in all sorts of directions. And so energy gets...
You don't have a filter. You're not using your filter.
Energy gets fragmented and broken apart, and therefore you don't accomplish either what you intended or as much as you could have because you're distracted. The second D is dispersion, and that's when your energy is scattered across too many things. The person that says yes, it kind of hits probably the people that are listening, Jeff. Dispersion, the people that are most susceptible to dispersion are very talented, ambitious people. And they either volunteer excessively or because they're sharp, they are invited and asked to do this and to do that and contribute here and serve on this and do this. Or they think, I'll start this business. I got it up and going, and then I've got this. I can do that as long as I get a good team here and so forth. And then all of a sudden, their mind is just locked, their RAM, and they're not being able to address the other areas of their life. So dispersion waters down what we're able to do. The third D, I think, maybe is the most insidious because you don't feel it at all, and that's drift. And drift is the gradual shifting off course that is barely perceptible because it's done so gradually, just like a kid on a raft or a floaty device in the ocean. Their parents are sitting on the beach. they start drifting down. They don't feel it. A boat in the ocean, you can drift off course, but it really gets people in marriage. It really gets people in their finances. It really gets people with weight. They get, 1/8 of an ounce, basically 1/8 of a pound. Little by little, they get off track. And since they don't feel it, they don't address it. And since they don't address it, it starts to build up like momentum. And there's a great line from Hemingway, I believe, when he writes, gradually, then suddenly.
He was talking about how he went broke. Yeah.
Yeah. And but just think about the marriage is kind of crummy. It's okay. Gradually, and then boom, then suddenly, or he was out running. I ran with him last weekend, and then he dropped dead the following Wednesday out on another workout. Gradually, something was going on inside his body, and it broke him. So that hits us all. And then delay is when the energy that you could have applied to something good in your life is not mobilized, so it's just dormant. So delay is dormant energy. All of these things are kind of misused, the misallocation of energy. So delay is dormant energy. Drift, you could say, is misdirected energy. Dispersion is scattered energy. And similar, but a little bit different, distraction is fragmented. It's broken into pieces. So you're kind of wasting yourself like that. And so delay, why do we delay? We often delay because we're not sure what to do. But the weird thing about delay
is it courage part of that? Lack of courage?
Yeah, like what would be the causes of that is all sorts of things. In other words, why would you not take action, particularly, and this is the weird human nature thing, but we've all done it. Why would we not take action on something even though we know our life is going to be worse off as a result of the inaction? I mean, animals don't do that in the woods. Humans are the only people that will go, hey, if I don't do this today, my life's going to be worse a little bit tomorrow. If I don't do this year, my life's going to be worse. No other creature except humans does that. So I would say rather than courage, it's almost like we need accountability. We do need courage. I mean, courage is a great thing, but even a wonderful human being left to his own devices is a great risk of slipping, not because it's Jeff or Tommy, but because we're human. And I think there's, you could look at the 4Ds as like the four little devils trying to keep us from the great plans that God has for our businesses, for our communities, for our marriages, for our bodies, for our health, for our futures, for the second half. I mean, a lot of people have very few options for the second half that excite them because they've been overcome by one or the 4Ds. I mean, I know all four of those Ds have affected me at one point.
And on the delay thing too, I think, this is where playing the long game and your faith can be really helpful because you really don't have anything to lose. God's in charge anyway. He's given you something to do, but it's still very difficult. And I think part of it for me is ego. Like, instead of playing for an audience of one, I'm playing for an audience of my peers. Sometimes that creates the delay. I don't jump because how am I going to be viewed if I'm different?
If you go back to the ego and the spiritual thing, and this is so hard for people to do, but I think for most people, maybe, is that if it is that audience of just your heavenly Father, and you're saying, what would he want me to do? What is he going to think of me? That means that you stand firm on what you believe, you speak up when it's the right thing to do, and you take action even when our peers might think we're either nuts or frown upon us for not keeping our mouth shut or whatever it is. But then you go, well, is God going to be pleased with me? And then if it is, getting to the point where that's how you make a decision on either green light or red light. Is this something that God would want me to do? Then you do it and you trust that he'll fill in the gaps. But, all of those can become habits. Like you could have something going on in your life that causes you to get distracted or to drift or to delay. But then that outside circumstance dissipates. But you've gone through several cycles of that and you're now 45 or you're 55, and you've actually just kind of got into the habit of being a distracted person, somebody who's not present fully in front of other, or when they're, with important people in their life, they're half there and they're half thinking about something else that just happened, or the next place they're going, after this. It'd be like me thinking the whole time I'm talking to you about what I'm doing immediately after. Well, I can maybe juggle that mentally okay, but that's not the right way to do it. And I'm not giving you everything that I should give you. But then what if it was our wives or our kids or somebody that we were mentoring and we were like half there? Because I think a lot of people get good at pretending they're all there and then they're not all there,
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was thinking about the rituals or the habits or whatever the term you want to use, I mean, to me, some of that is just is being reflective. Like I wouldn't recognize that I was drifting. I wouldn't recognize that I was distracted. I wouldn't recognize, that I've been delaying until I at least sat down and, kind of analyzed my day or my week or my month or my life.
You got to have a timeout. But, and that's a great way to say it too, is it's real easy to be sleepwalking, and I think much of the world is sleepwalking. And so they're not aware even of what they're not aware of. But for drift, there is a straightforward antidote to that. And that is to identify, like this past summer, I caught up on a goal that I had wanted to accomplish when I was 29 and I missed it, which was to summit Mount Rainier. And so 30 years later, which was this past June 11th, I summited Mount Rainier with two of my sons and several of their friends. So it was at the time, a 58-year-old Tommy. It was me, 58, and then two 19-year-olds and three 27-year-olds and our guides. Even the oldest guide, I was 20 years old. Anyway, it was the hardest thing I ever did, but I had to train for it for 9 months. And so to keep me from drifting, I had a clear goal. I summit Mount Rainier by end of day, June 11th, 2025.
You had some accountability too, because you had guys that, you don't want to let them down.
Right. And I actually hired a coach. I heard that's a great thing. So I had a coach who had taken people not only to the top of Rainier, but to the top of Everest. And I went out to Vail and I trained with him. And then he got a guy to work on my fitness routine. But here's where I was going with it. I had milestones. So in between October of 24 and June of 25, I had an outcome. I had habits, but then there were certain levels of conditioning that I was supposed to hit by February 1, April 1, and the end of May. And it was essentially one main one, which is a number of step ups you can do that are each 1 foot in 1 hour. And it was 1,000. So what kept me from drifting? Well, it was April and I was at like 780. So I was like almost 250 behind the schedule. So I knew I had to pick up the pace and to get there. So we can do that in our fitness. We can do that in our business and finances. Of course, you have those intermediate signposts. We can do it in marriage. Are we doing the things, the rituals actually could end up being, feedback mechanisms for you, and they could be those milestones for you. And then it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal.
I know you've written a lot about gratitude. So where does gratitude fall into all of this in terms of being helpful in terms of a mindset?
I think gratitude is right up there with like love. It's hard to sometimes distinguish the two, and there's, I don't know a lot about this, so it's dangerous for me to even talk about it, but I do understand it at the surface level, like quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and how you can measure the energy of people's thought lives, which of course is, we all, thoughts are electrical and chemical happenings that are going on all the time. But gratitude and love are almost equivalent as far as emitting positive energy. Gratitude is a little more tangible in my mind, in that you can work on gratitude a lot more on your own. But gratitude is like if you could only have one mindset, to have a thankful, gracious, appreciative mindset, so you're having a great day, you're thankful for the great day. You're having a not so great day, and you're thankful for that too, because you know that it's going to help you appreciate the good day, the next good day when it comes. And they're all kind of good days, outside of a tragedy. And then also it's strengthening you so that you can be more like a detective. You can be more thorough in looking for things to be grateful for. I love doing, and I recommend it highly to all of my 1% clients, which is gratitude walks. I might be a little biased because I love walking and hiking, but I won't just immediately put in the earbuds and listen to a pod. I'll do that, but I'll usually walk for, depending on the length of the walk, from 15 minutes to an hour, and I'll just be rehearsing things that I'm grateful for. But I'll go back to, I'm grateful for my childhood. I'm grateful for the home that I lived in. I'm grateful for my parents' encouragement.
Things big and small. Yeah.
Yeah, like mine are eclectic. I'm grateful for all the mistakes I haven't made, the sins I haven't committed. I'm grateful for everybody that's ever smiled at me or prayed for me or encouraged me. But they won't all be that. But it's if you just say I'm grateful for my family, my faith, and my health, and you're done, it's not as powerful. But I think there's, just like we could never be too loving, right? Probably. I don't think we can be too grateful. And so if I get up, I don't do this every day, but every so often, and it is one of the things that we'll recommend at the couples retreat, is we'll say, get up, and as part of your early morning success ritual, which you probably remember me talking about, that's what you do in the first hour of the morning to get your head and your body and your spirit right. But one of those things is, hey, get up and not just make a gratitude list, but make a list of the things you're grateful for about your wife or your husband. And the darndest thing happens. I mean, if you do that in the morning, you will end up seeing more of those things in reality as the day goes on. And if you do that periodically, you're going to start now, hey, my wife has really turned it on. She's really like taking herself to the next level. She's being so nice to me. No, 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 no. You were filtering those things out largely. I'm not saying 100%, but you're filtering those things out. So whatever we're grateful for, we notice more of in the next hour and the next 24 hours. And so I have a hard time doing it just in my head. So I probably have volumes and volumes of notebooks that are repetitive and look, maybe like all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy kind of thing. But it's just me writing over and over and over again what I'm grateful for from different angles, just like I was trying to, work my hips or my shoulders. I would do 20 different exercises, different angles, movements, heavyweight, lightweight. I think it's important to do that with gratitude. But that gratitude would be you could paraphrase Philippians 4:8 to say, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever you're grateful for, dwell on these things. Like if you had to compress it, it would be that. So I think that's a great question.
That's awesome. That's really insightful. Well, you talked about retirement's kind of what they do with the old airplanes and ships. They put them out to pasture in the desert or something, and you don't want any part of that, and neither do I. So, what are you working on now, Tommy? What are you working on now? And as we wrap up here, I want to make sure people know how they can find you, follow you, learn about you, and understand what you offer in terms of coaching and encouragement and material.
Sure. So I can be reached easily at Tommy@TommyNewberry.com. So that's my email right there, Tommy@TommyNewberry.com, or you can go to the website and track me down. I'm also on Instagram and X, TommyNewberry.com. And I think it's pretty easy. And then at Coach Tommy Newberry on Instagram. But I'm easy to find just Googling. What I'm working on is I'm doing more and more one-on-one coaching, and I love that. And we are getting ready to deliver, as we're talking here, our 28th annual couples planning retreat. We're doing it at Palmetto Bluff this year. So been doing that since 1999, and that is designed to help growth-oriented couples live out an intentional marriage. And we did that for 14 years at Blackberry Farm, and then in the balance of that time, we've been doing it at different places. And then I'm working on some books and things kind of on the side. But my passion from working is helping people realize that you can't outthink God, that whatever your biggest, boldest, craziest dreams are, that if you invite God to help you pick out your goals, it's going to be bigger and better than ever. And the final thing that I see emerging is working with right out of college age kids, helping the next generation make use of their 20s, because I think too many get into their late 20s and haven't made good use of that time. They haven't understood really how the world works. They haven't understood how to get focused or how to defeat the 4Ds. I mean, what if your 22-year-old knew how to defeat distraction, dispersion, drift, and delay? They'd be unstoppable. So I've got some coaches that work with young people.
That's exciting, because that cohort really needs help too, because a lot of them are coming out with some negativity in terms of the world and their opportunities, and they need a different perspective.
Yeah, and there's a lot of optimism there, though. Like, I'm optimistic regardless of anything I do. I see there's a lot of, it's kind of like a great 4-8 application. So with the young generation today, maybe coming out of college, there's a lot of cynicism and negativity, and that's true. And there's also a lot of optimism, abundance thinking, and bold young people who think, you know what, I don't need to participate in the melodrama of what's going on in the world. There's a lot more young people interested in entrepreneurship. There are a lot more people in college learning what value creation is all about. And, you could go through the greatest of prep schools and colleges and never really get value creation, or how the free market is, such a great blessing to billions of people. So I'm planning to do this for the rest of my life, which I hope is a long life. But just in case, that means I would go out doing something I love. That actually changed me. I'll say one last thing. I was on a plane when I was a consultant, and I don't know what made me think of it. Maybe there was a plane crash or something. This was back 30 something years ago. And I thought, gosh, if this plane went down and I'm 24 and I'm not really doing what I love, God, what a pathetic happening that would be. And there's nothing holding me back except what was in my head at the time. That was what was holding me back. I didn't say that, but it was like you saying you might not do things because of ego. So when I was that age, I was thinking, well, if I leave this great job that most of my friends would like to have, and I go start something on my own that I'm not qualified to do, they're going to think I'm a nut, And so I held off. I probably would have done it sooner. And then finally I did it.
Good stuff. So good. Thank you, Tommy. This has been fantastic. And
I enjoyed it.
Thank you for being with us. And I hope you guys got some value. I sure did. This will be one I'll bookmark and listen to more than once. A lot of nuggets of wisdom that we can use every day. So thank you, Tommy. And thank you for joining us. And if you guys are interested in learning more about the show, you can check out past episodes of the Money and Meaning Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Give it a listen, give it a rating, refer it to a friend. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can email me at moneyandmeaning@tandemgrowth.com. And of course, if you want to check out our work professionally, you can find that at tandemgrowth.com website as well. So thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Money and Meaning Show with Jeff Bernier, a show dedicated to help you gain the confidence and freedom to lead a life of personal significance and help you get your actions and resources in alignment with what matters most. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments on the show, feel free to reach out to us at moneyandmeaning@tandemgrowth.com. or you can find us on the web at www.tandemgrowth.com. Jeff Bernier is the President and Chief Investment Officer at Tandem Growth Financial Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This show is a production of Tandem Growth Financial Advisors, LLC. All information discussed is general in nature, is provided for informational purposes only, and should not be construed as specific financial, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult an attorney or tax professional regarding their specific legal or tax situation. Listeners should not rely on the content of this podcast as the basis for any investment decisions. A professional advisor should be consulted and/or independent due diligence should be conducted before implementing anything discussed in this show. While information presented is believed to be factual and up-to-date, Tandem Growth Financial Advisors, LLC, does not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Tandem Growth Financial Advisors, LLC, does not make any representations or warranties as to the accuracy, timeliness, suitability, completeness, or relevance of any information prepared by any unaffiliated third party, such as guests on the podcast, and takes no responsibility for the same.